let's get back to it. As I was mentioning before, I want to line up my hips a little bit more. So I'm going to start by re-establishing my center line on my torso, right? So the rib cage needs to be straight here. It curves as it kind of comes down to here, right? And then I need to establish my aces, my two aces points. I like them going, I want them to go like that, right? And I can see that I'm not really in the center anymore, all right? So, you know, it's easy to kind of just sort of grab the sculpt and twist and everything, but you then have to, you know, modify that. You know, you got to pull it back. I feel like I have more hip on this side now, right? So I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to bring that to that outside and get that aces, the greater trochanter to pop out a little bit more on that one. As we kind of come down, something like that. And then this side, I have a little bit too much glute on this side. So I'm going to pull some of that kind of up because this hip is sort of pulling under. And I feel like based on where my legs are going, you know, this is maybe needs to kind of come up a little bit. Maybe I actually need a little bit more material kind of up here. So what I'm doing here now is I got to bring this belly back a little bit, right? Because this needs to be flat and feel even, right? This side's a little bit thicker, right? So I'm going to bring some of this back. And if that's tilting, then it needs to come in a little bit more. People don't want to know what a sophisticated math problem this is, right? This is all, you know, problem solving. You know, looking at the two things, getting them to feel like they're working together, right? Getting them to, you know, you got two things that are clearly sort of not the same, but they're supposed to be symmetrical. Right, so you can see what I'm doing here actually is I'm adding more material to the back side of the leg. Right, so this is actually fairly important and difficult to fully explain. Right, so in doing this, right, and bringing this down here, right, and I feel like this isn't looking right, so I'm adding more material here, right? But then what's that going to do for the thickness of my leg? Right? So if this one, which we established, right, needs to be kind of about here, right? Now all of a sudden, look, that's way too thick, right? So that means I can bring some of this down, right? And this is a place where it wasn't looking even, and I got the glute muscles coming in here, over here, and I'm actually going to split the difference here. I'm going to add a little bit of this up here. Get a little bit more material coming in on this side, right? And I'm pushing that one down a little bit, right? And that's making it feel like the two legs are starting, right, to come out of the pelvis at the same spot. Right? And that feels better to me. Right? I'm going to add a little bit more to this belly over here, so again, kind of trying to find that symmetry. I'm constantly looking at it. I'm constantly looking at it. my measurements, but going back and looking at the actual figure. More material in here. And put a little bit more material in on this side as well. Because I was just adding down, like now I'm missing some material back down under here. And for that, I'm going to go back to my low drawing, my low set. All right, so as I said, I'm feeling that that's actually looking a little bit better, although I want to take this back. Still feeling a little uneven. Pull this one out a little bit more. Sometimes when I sculpt, I'll have a tendency to kind of neglect an area. So I've been kind of neglecting this area back here. And now that I've kind of come back around here, I feel like I want that, get those hips kind of going that way. And I want that other heel to come this way. And get just a little bit kind of longer. Squish it. Sometimes if it doesn't want to stay, you just squish it. Especially if the clay is harder, you squish out the clay kind of around it. That's feeling a little bit better to me. Let's come up a little higher now. And a lot of what I'm doing is really just sort of making things look like they match, right? And how exactly do you do that? Well, you have to have a little bit of a sense of sort of some of the anatomy of the forms, but it also just has to look right. This thing looks the same as that thing, right? So sometimes when you when you're pushing around the form too much, which is okay to do, but it'll open certain sections up. It is actually important that you go back in and kind of close them. Right? So now that looks silly, right? But a little bit of quick clay and it kind of will close up that gap. So I mentioned that the leg has, I don't know if I mentioned it, maybe in the previous video I mentioned. The leg has a center line, all right? So this is the center line for the body, but the leg itself has its own center line. And as I imagine it, it curves a little in this direction, but that's another, so it goes down like this, and it goes to the kneecap, right? And then it goes down, and it goes, I kind of line it up with the middle of the foot, but it kind of, the angle of the side of the toes. So the toe isn't on it, but the toe kind of follows it, right? But it's off to the inside a little bit. And then in the back, right? In the back, it cuts through the two hamstrings. So if you feel in the back of your leg, right? You have, if you feel in the back of your, underneath your knee, you'll feel that you have two tendons on the inside and one on the outside. So on the inside, they are the semitendinous and the semimembranous, and on the outside, it's the bicep femoris. Those create a line, right, like that, and that line corresponds with this, right? And so now you see that my foot is going like that. And so see how that's a smidgy bit off. So I'm gonna use that to kind of pull to open up this part of the leg so that those match. Right? And then on the inside, right, this also has, so if my hamstrings are gonna be, not, the foot's tweaked a little bit, but my hamstrings then need to be kind of a little bit more like this. Right? Now why that's particularly important is, well, one, it gives you the direction of the legs, right? That's really important. But it's also going to allow you to put the calf muscles on correctly, because what we're going to see here in a second is that your semitendinous and your semimembranous come around the front of the leg. They come down like this, they come around here, and they attach to the front. Now look, watch that as I do that again. So they come around like this. I gotta jump here. But then they go right into this and go like that. So there, see that rhythm, right, that ties these forms together. Now on the inside here, right, you have one of the adductor muscles, the long sartorius, and the semitendinous and the semimembranous. They all come in here, right? And so you got four things attaching to the front of your tibia, and they splay out like this, right? And they make this thing that's called the Goose Foot. Right? We're gonna be sculpting that here in a little bit. But right now I'm gonna sort of work on my hamstrings back here. But I want to put them in first, all right? So I'm gonna over-exaggerate that a little bit so I can get that cleaned up. Right? And get that shape to have sort of the bulge of the muscle. This is gonna split down here. On this side, it's gonna split. You notice I take a little piece of clay each time and do it. Right? And then I'm going to, because this is the way I like to work, right? And it's similar to a kind of cross contour line. Right? Put the material on in one direction, and then I rake across in the other direction. Right? And that allows me to nicely kind of see the form, right, so I can shape it a little bit more. There's different marks. It's so we're going to be talking more about digital sculpture. When I work in ZBrush, I prefer to sculpt with my meshes on. I'm sure, there are different, ways of doing it at different times when it's helpful. But for me, and maybe it's because I have this kind of background, I see it so much better when you can see all of those meshes, right? And that's what these little tool marks are. They're like the mesh for me. They help me to see that form, because the lumpy, bumpy clay can almost become kind of sort of distracting. All right, so then as we go down here, now what ends up happening is the muscles on the back of your leg, right? What we normally call the calf muscles, right? They're actually the gracilis muscles. Excuse me, I just misspoke. Right? They are the gastrocnemicus muscles, and the two gastrocnemicus muscles have a medial. Medial means inside. Lateral, like a lateral throw in football, is to the outside. Right? So the lateral is this side, and then the medial. The two heads of your gastrocnemicus, which sort of form the shape, all right, of our calf muscle there, right? They go up and they insert in between those hamstrings, right? So the hamstrings, right? So this one is the bicep femoris. This one is the combined semitendinous and semimembranous. Unless somebody's a marathon runner, you're not going to really see them. But what you will see is the slight sort of separation between the two of them. Right? And so sculpting in this way, even though, like we're looking at Jennifer, you can't see that line all that clearly. If you look, it's there. Right? But sculpting in this way will help us to get the overall forms and shapes correct, right? So we can move on. And eventually I'll just sort of bring them all kind of together. Let's go to the outside here. So I'm gonna sculpt on this whole sort of region here. So right here we have our tensor, the tensor fasciae latte, which I always think sounds like a beverage from a coffee shop. And again, the body fat is going to come in and is going to cover over some of this stuff, but I'm gonna sculpt a little bit of the musculature because it helps me to sort of see things, right? Because you can see that we're gonna have this fold that's gonna come around, but it's gonna sit right on top of this. Right? So there's your tensor muscle. Your gluteus medius sits about here, right? And then the large gluteus maximus wraps all the way around here. Right? And on a female figure, the way Jennifer is built, right? The body fat is covering up most of that glute muscle, but it is important that we know that it comes around here like this, right? And then comes in. And those three things, the tensor, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus maximus, are all sitting around, right, and wrapping around where our greater trochanter is. Right? Because her hip is thrust out a little bit, the trochanter, the head is dropping down, so it's probably really actually kind of about here. Kind of up a little bit too high. And then those attached to your long IT band, right? Iliotibial band, right? That means it attaches to the iliac crest via the gluteus maximus and medius, and then comes down here. Now on most figures, right, you can see that IT band. You can maybe feel it on yourself as a sort of cut on the side of the leg, right? You can already see it sort of building up a little bit here. Right, so I use that to kind of shave that. And what it does is the IT band kind of squeezes the bicep femoris, and then on the other side, it squeezes forward your vastus lateralis, which is one of your quadricep muscles. You see the legs starting to come together, right? IT band on a little bit more there. as I mentioned, the shape of my knee kind of was getting a little bit away from me there, all right? So I'm gonna sort of flatten out the top of that patella, all right? The patella sits right about at the top of your tibia, right? It's sometimes a little bit confusing because you have the rectus femoris comes in and is like a little band, right? And if you feel on the top of your leg, you can feel like that little sort of rectangle on the top, right? It's like a little tiny sort of rectangle band on the top. And then you have your patella underneath that. And then, you know, and you can see it when we look at it. And then underneath that, we have like a little sort of fatty pad. I do not know the name of that little fatty pad, but it sits underneath and it's about the same size. So the patella and that little fat pad look like another like little rectangle that sort of sits underneath that. All right? And sort of, so we have that kind of shape there. And that will cause then, in the front of the tibia, will cause the front of the shin to kind of bulge out just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little. Kind of sort of goose foot shape coming down here. Fibula has migrated forward. So sort of. So, you know, as you get, so if my heel is over here, coming up by Achilles tendon here. And every time I sculpt in one area, I sort of take a little bit away from something else sometimes, right? Sorry, I'm a little distracted. I can hear an alarm going off in the background. Hoping that is not in my building. So I just twisted that a little bit more and I opened up a space in here. So I'm going to go in there, put some clay in there, squish that all in so that it, if you don't go in and squish those little areas in when you make little cracks, which happens, it's totally fine. If you don't go in and squish them in though, they can become a little bit problematic later on. Not on a sculpt of this scale, but if you're working on something that's a little bit larger, the weight of the clay can start to become a little bit of an issue. And so it's not just having an armature that's strong enough, but also having your buildup of clay strong enough as well. All right, so. All right, I'm going to take another break there, and then I'm going to come back. Now notice I'm not taking my my leg, 100%. Right, so I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to go and I'm going to take this her left leg a little bit farther than the right leg, and then I'm going to come back. And each time it'll go a little bit faster. All right, see you in a few. All right, so yeah, matching up the two legs now. All right, so again, this one isn't 100%. Right, we don't want it to be 100%. Right? First thing I'm going to do is I think I'm going to check some measurements. All right, I can check my measurements a couple of different ways. Check that this one was the right one. Right, this leg's a hair thick, but that's okay. I like it a little bit better. Okay, and that's pretty close, especially when I trim it down a little bit. Should be about that wide. Again, just a hair thick on that one, and a little bit too wide on this one. Okay. And so it tells me a little bit about how I should approach this leg. And do I want to approach it from the point of view of removing more material or adding more material? So start here. Again, I want to sort of establish where my center is here. So similarly, right, if my foot is twisting a little bit this way, this kind of makes sense. My kneecap is a little bit off, right? So I want my kneecap to, but this will sort of pull kind of around here and come in like that. But I want to get it to sort of come out a little bit. Out, right, rotating that way. So for me, as an instructor, right, so one of my jobs is to be able to talk about this stuff as I'm doing it, which many years of demoing in front of people have enabled that. But the reality is that when I sculpt on my own, I tend to think differently than words. You can even see as I'm trying to sort of sculpt and form a thought at the same time. Although you can do that, we can do anything we want. But I sometimes, when I'm sculpting on my own, I tend to think in sounds. So all the different types of shapes, they have sounds in my mind, and so it's difficult sometimes to come up with words that sort of match what those sounds are. But that's how I see how things are sort of radiating or moving around, or particularly shapes. Like a particular shape has like a sort of certain something. And I always encourage people as much as possible to try to figure out, how to. That's part of being an artist, I think, right? Figure out how your brain works. How do you see certain types of things? Do you see shapes as colors or sounds? A lot of it's very common for people to see in color. I would love to experience what that is like. I don't think in color in the same way as I do in shape. Shape and sound. Sound is very, very important to me as an artist. I shouldn't. It's not even as an artist. It's really it's a very important sort of thing for me as a human, because that's what art is. Art is an expression of the human condition. And I find that people like to come up with really kind of convoluted sort of definitions of or understandings of what art really is. But for me, I like things simple. Right? I like abstractions as much as people might think that Eric is he's a realist, or he likes naturalism and all of these other kinds of things, and that is, while that's true, I see this as all abstraction, right? And abstraction is a simplification of a known thing, right? And so for me, this is all working with bits and pieces of abstractions. So I like to keep it simple. I like my definition of art to be very sort of simple and clean, right? Art is an expression of the human condition. Different people are going to fall into different sort of places, but you know, for me, I think that if it is art, then it is about us. I've always disagreed with the idea that cats can make art. Can cats paint? Yes, absolutely, they can paint. But if your definition of art is that art is an expression of the human condition, what do cats know about that? You know, they make expressions of the feline condition, right? So they can do it in paint, but it's not, in my mind, it's not art. It's something else, and it's probably a wonderful, beautiful thing. And we should totally, reflect on that. But that's not what I do. Right? I'm into making art about people, by people, for people. I don't make art for cats. Those of you who are watching this video that are in my classes, we can talk about some of the new ideas about objects and sort of what's going on with that, and maybe come to maybe have an interesting sort of debate or discussion about the value of sort of the experience of an object. While there might be some art opinions out there that I do not agree with, I wouldn't want them to go away. That's one of the things, sort of, if you're working with me or in a class, as we sort of think about sort of art stuff here, big ticket, art stuff. I love living in a world where there are lots of different points of view. Although you're watching a video, you're in a class with me, you're watching a video on how to do something that is what I do. I wouldn't want all the artists in the world to do this. In fact, I'm always wondering why I train more people to do this, because it's kind of crazy. I wish that less people did what I do, right? Because you guys are my competition. So, why am I giving away all my secrets, right? And so, but no, I like to. I like the art world to be really big and broad and filled with all kinds of diverse perspectives, not a sort of one-size-fits-all kind of a thing. Because if there was one-size-fits-all and that was all we did, then what I do might not be special anymore. Right? It might not be of value. Keep sort of moving that ankle bone down a little bit, so I want to get this sort of. So I'm lining up with this. Now I have to come all the way back around, and like the other side, I got to sort of pay attention to where those hamstrings are, how they split, right? And then that relationship to that heel, as that sort of heel is going to be kind of kicking over. Sculpting the actual feet, right, will be for a later stage. But right now I'm just trying to get the overall sort of shape of them as it relates to the lower leg. Right? Okay, so this is actually important. I just moved the ASIS point back as I'm sort of continuing to kind of, reshape my pelvis at various points and, looking for that symmetry. So as I move this point back a little bit, that's going to change this length. All right, so I am going to have to go back and take a measurement. So I'm going to measure from where the leg comes up here to the kneecap, about there, and actually it looks like it even needs to go back a little bit further. And so when we make those kinds of changes, that's good like that. And when we make changes to one thing, they can impact other areas. Okay, so. Sort of stuff in there. I'll have to resolve these in a little bit. Okay. Actually liking the way that looks. All right, let's see. Clean my tools off here. Yeah, I think that this is actually a good place to stop. Right? I would like to. These legs are obviously. I'm going to say that my torso, my lower sections of my torso, are maybe 50% done. I'm going to say that my legs are maybe 60% done. Okay, they're pretty harmonized. They're working. The overall sort of form and the overall forms are there. I'm capturing and slightly exaggerating the gesture. How far I want to take that still needs to be left till we have all of the forms on there. Right. So at this point in time, I'd like to stop. Right. When we come back next time, we're going to dig into the shoulder girdle. All right, so work today on, part one was the armature. Part two was the major forms of the torso. Part three was the major forms of the legs, and we spent a lot of time on the pelvic girdle, right? So getting these things to integrate together. Next time, part four, we're gonna dig into our arms and the shoulder girdle, including the scapula and the pectoral muscles, right? And that's when I think that the sculpt will really start to come together. And then once we've gotten all of that, then we can start refining everything, right? Starting to take a look at some of the details, maybe work on some of the face, do some things with the hands, etc. All right. See you next time.